Hello everybody, this is Seto Kaiba from your Yu-Gi-Oh chat channel, and today I'm going to profile you an old school deck. This probably will be a new segment I will be doing on some old decks that if you like playing an unrated on Dual Network or unrated on Yu-Gi-Oh Pro, you can use these old school decks that I used to use back in the day. I will be posting different ones, but this is one of my first really competitive hero decks. Now, you have to remember, you may be wondering, like, why are cards like Stratos not in this deck? Well, because Stratos wasn't out yet. This is after, I made this deck after Heart of the Duelist came out. Excuse me, Power of the Duelist came out back in late 2006. So, back in 2006, this is when I made this deck. I have been using before this the Horus deck and the Blue Eyes deck before that. So I made the horse deck, but it was 3 years later, and I wanted to start getting the heroes because they looked like they were starting to become good. And that's why I chose this deck. And I made it, and it took me a while to make, but it was a very fun deck, and it's still a fun deck to play, but as you notice, there's a lot of things that have been banned on here, and the deck, you can still play it unrated, but this is how the format back 7 years ago actually looked like, and I'll explain it to you. Some things why. So first off, you will notice that it's all E heroes in the fusion deck. Stuff, these are some other side deck things you would use. Sometimes you would switch them out. But your main thing was Stratos wasn't around yet. Stuff like that wasn't around. Absolute Zero wasn't around. You gotta imagine a lot of staple cards that are for heroes nowadays, like Shining and stuff like that. That stuff did not exist in this timeline yet. And the heroes really at this time were not supreme. They hadn't been really doing good on the um, national stage, on stages like that. They did, and I think that the fall of 2006, the summer of 2006, they really didn't even top really because they were really not that good. You were trying pretty much, you just had Poly, and you were using Poly with two other monsters to just, you were pretty much using 3 cards to make one monster. That's a lot. Well, after Power of the Duelist came out, it kind of changed, and it made things more interesting, so I'll go through that. So we ran 3 Elemental Wild Hearts, which was really an awesome card back in its day. Clayman we ran 2, Sparkman we ran 2, Elemental Hero Blade Edge, which was an awesome card in my deck, was you ran 2. You had to run 3 King of the Swamps if you wanted to use fusion substitutes, which we did use it stuff. We didn't use Wingman, so we had to use King of the Swamp. And plus, you were able to search out cards, but he was mostly in there for a substitute. Breaker was too good back then, even though it wasn't an E hero. Because I think at the time Mystical Typhoon was only at 1, so Breaker really helped that back row hate. Because you have to remember back in 06, in the younger days of Yu-Gi-Oh, everybody ran a lot of trap cards. So to counter that, you either ran Royal Decrees, and if you didn't draw the Royal Decrees, you ran a Jinzo, and to counter that, you ran some back row hate too for stuff. But Breaker was great, and DD Warrior back in its day was just an awesome, amazing card. Banishing, you have to remember back then, besides Different Dimension, Return from a Different Dimension, if you weren't maining that card, then pretty much your card was gone from the duel. And you pretty much could ram any powerful card. Tsukiyomi back then was at 1. Um, but it was so great in this deck for combos because back then Magician of Fate was at 2, or Magical Merchant I could use. I could just go Tsukiyomi, Magician of Faith, get another, Future Fusion, reuse a Future Fusion, reuse, Miracle Fusion, reuse anything I really wished. And it was really fun to use in this combination of this deck. Sangan was too good at that time not to run a Sangan. Magician of Faith was too good to be used as one of the reasons why it's banned. Same thing as Sangan. It searches too well. You can reuse too many good cards. Reaper was in there originally because Reaper, pretty much at the time, was a good stall card, and because of its effect, if you did attack with it, you could discard an opponent's card, which hand control, you have to remember at the back then was very important. Field control was more important than life points at that time. You could have low life points back then, but if you had field control with Jinzo and you could say no traps can be used, you had a better advantage against your opponent. It was going to be a stand-up fight. Magical Merchant was great. You could pretty much thin through your deck, and with Miracle Fusion, you could get a Miracle Fusion and then, fusion summon a monster. It was great. Jinzo was in there because pretty much what you're trying to do is lock down your opponent's trap backfield, which traps back then involved mostly a bottomless trap hole, Torrential Tribune, Mirror Force, trap hole, Sakuretsu. If you remember Sakuretsu, if you attack, your opponent's monster is destroyed. Stuff like that, which was very annoying back then. And a great card back during the late, I think it was the fall of 2006, early 2007, was at 3, and now is banned completely. Future Fusion at this time with Power of the Duelist was at 3. And so this card was just completely on the nuts because I could just make fusion monsters like crazy. Such an awesome card. Sad it's banned though, but I guess trying to make 5-headed dragons and dropping all that stuff is just crazy. Miracle Fusion is awesome, still is, and a must for any hero deck, but back then you could use it in combination with other cards. Graceful Charity got banned, and one of the main reasons why this card is never going to come back is Dark Worlds. Can you imagine somebody, I draw a Grapha, I draw Snow, I draw another, Brow, I drop a Brow and a Snow, and a Grapha, Talk about thinning your deck and making pluses as you go. Because this card, you could discard any 2 cards from your hand, and the original text said that, so that was just ridiculous. And that's why that card would never come a ban. In this deck, it just thinned out the deck, and because of Miracle Fusion, you could do some things. Because you could banish from your field. I did sometimes run Return from the Different Dimension because we're running Royal Decree and Jinzo. We didn't do that much off. We didn't do that really that much because it messed up with the funk of the deck. Heavy Storm because of back row hate. Mystical Typhoon because of back row hate. I think Mystical Typhoon at the time was only at 1 though. Smashing Ground back then was awesome. Really, really was, especially with heroes. Noble Crossout was to deal with those any pesky cards, like if somebody was running, Sangan, stuff like that. You got rid of pest cards like Marsh Mulan and stuff like that, and Man-Eater Bugs and all that cuckoo stuff. Book of Moon, it's in here because it can be used in offensive, defensive capabilities, like it still is used today. But you could also use it to flip down, Magician of Faith. Back then, you could just abuse that Magician of Faith so much. She got, Snatch and Steal. Well, how many of you remember this old freaking card that is just ridiculously awesome? Oh, and your opponent gets 1,000 life points. Okay. I snatch your best monster in the field. Okay, I run you over. Game. Awesome card. Back then, this was a card that pretty much everybody was running. It was a staple card. Like Sangan and pretty much some of these cards here, Snatch and Steal, Mia Force, and Torrential Tribune, they were staple cards at the time. Scapegoat, awesome card. Very awesome card. It was mostly there for stalling power. It worked. Same thing with swords because back then you could run stalling cards in your deck and win. Royal Decree, as you can see, it was in there because we wanted to stop those traps that really hurt heroes. Torrential Tribune and Mio Force, like I said, were in there even though we were running Royal Decree and Jinzo. Back then, you would run those because pretty much they were just too good of a card. They cleared your opponent's field, left their field wide open, and they were just too good not having the deck. And if the MST were heavy your Royal Decree, you could just throw this down and because you had it in your hand. So that worked out well. Side deck included 2 Elemental Hero Thunder Giants, 1 Elemental Hero Wild Wingman, 2 Elemental Hero Wild Edge, which was an awesome card, really. For 26, and now you can attack all your opponent's monsters on the field. It was awesome. Elemental Hero Tempest, we ran 2 of them. Elemental Hero Necro Shaman, we ran 2 of them. Elemental Hero Shining Flare Wingman, which is an awesome card. Still in Heroes, we ran 2 of them. At the time, this was a very good card. I don't know if it still really is in Heroes, but Elemental Hero Shining Phoenix Enforcer was very good back then. So we ran 2 of them. Elemental Hero Rampardo Blast, we ran 2 of them as well. These cards, you have to remember, I know it's not a lot of hero cards that you see run nowadays, but you have to remember a lot of those cards had not come out yet, or they were very hard to get a hold of. So this is the version of Heroes that I ran. Like this video if you love Heroes, like I used to love Heroes. You have to remember this deck, like it says up here, Heroes '06. This was made in the late 2006. After the ban list and after Nationals, I started making this deck. But I just wanted to take you guys on an old trip. I'll probably start a new segment on some old decks I have. I don't know what my next segment deck's going to be. It may be my Magical Scientist deck that I used to run. But I just wanted to profile you and talk about the old days because, as you can tell, like it's a different. I think sometimes the older decks take more skill. It took more skill, I think, in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh than it does now. It's more fast-paced. You were looking for OTKs back then. OTKs, that was awesome if you could do it, but it really wasn't. It was once in a while thing. It wasn't happening all the time. Duels lasted maybe 10, 12 minutes. They didn't last 5 minutes. So stuff like that. I just wanted to go back in time and just talk to you guys about it. But I hope you like this video. I'm probably going to do more, but this is the old 2006 Heroes. So until next time, everybody, Seto Kaiba, out.